Yes, indeedy. Welcome to the Upful Life Podcast. I'm your host, B. Getz, and this is episode number 28, coming at you live and direct from the Vibe Junkie Studios in Oakland, California. And we are oh so grateful you are tuning in. The Upful Life Podcast is honored and privileged to welcome my dear friend Jessica Dore to the show. You can find her on Twitter at the Jessica Dore, D-O-R-E. Also Instagram at the Jessica Dore. Jessica is a licensed social worker using tarot cards to talk about mental health. Now, she's a former editor with Psych Central and New Harbinger, but most recently she's been carving her own path with a huge following on social media, including like 130,000 followers on Twitter, almost 100,000 on Instagram, and marrying the worlds of tarot and psychology in a way all her own, at once new yet ancient. And it's a really profound practice, and her story is inspiring. Now, I've been happy and proud to call Jessica my friend for upwards of 15 years. Dating back to the halcyon days in New Orleans. But really, I wanted to get the scoop on how she got to where she is. And by where she is in the Berkeley Hills, in this absolutely majestic, picturesque, tranquil, beautiful treehouse studio where she is writing a book about tarot and psychology. So now we've been sort of crisscrossing around. She's now living in Philadelphia, but is out here writing the book. Now, some of you may know I'm from the Philadelphia area. So it's funny that I finally settled out here in Oakland, where she lived for some time. And she, in turn, moved to Philadelphia. But now she's back out here in the Berkeley Hills writing a book, and was kind enough to invite me over to that space so we could have this interview, which was really more like a powwow between old friends. And we touched on, of course, New Orleans. We touched on her practice with reading tarot and its relationship to psychology, and how she's sort of interpolating and interpreting that with her daily readings on Twitter, and how that sort of built its own momentum and interaction with folks, and the magic of social media. It's just a great story, an inspiring story. And of course, we had to talk a little bit about her yoga practice. She's a yogini, if you will, ashtanga yoga. And she's also a proponent and devotee of Jamaican Dancehall, which is precisely why the soundtrack to episode 28 has been all about Kingston vibes. Lady J, Jessica, who for a time explored dee-jaying, dancehall, and lived in Jamaica, and she talks about that a bit. But the majority of the conversation is focused on her work with tarot, mental health. So with that, I'm going to let this Lady G, Enough Respect, play out for a moment. Earlier you heard Lady Saw, No Long Talk, classic dancehall record. Now I'm coming with Enough Respect. And then we'll hear from Lady J, Jessica Dore, at the Jessica Dore, on the Up for Life podcast, episode 28. And I'm your host, B. Getz. Welcome to the Up for Life podcast. I'm your host, B. Getz, and I'm in a absolutely picturesque, idyllic setting with a dear friend, Jessica Dore. Pronouncing your last name right?
I say Dore. My family says Dore, but I like Dore because I think that's actually what it was originally.
Okay.
I think they, assimilation turned it to Dore, but it means golden in French, which is nice.
Oh,
and
right
if you say
on.
Dore, that's more.
I was thinking about it on the way over here, whether I was going to ask beforehand or just do it on the air, but I figured I would do it on the air, so you might have an opportunity to explain it as such.
Uh-huh.
So, yeah, and on Instagram and Twitter, you're the Jessica Dore,
Yeah.
D-O-R-E.
Mm-hmm.
And we've been friends for a long time, as I mentioned in the introduction before the interview started. I've known you upwards of nearly 15 plus years now.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And we've sort of crisscrossed our lives bi-coastal and in the bayou in a variety of ways. And I had the fortune of running into you on the street the other day near where I live in the Lake Merritt area of Oakland. And now we're out here in this picturesque treehouse in the Berkeley Hills for this interview. So all that to say, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's an honor and a
See
privilege and a joy, not just for the interview, but to catch up with you, to see you. It's really inspirational to watch from afar through like the different mediums and see what you're up to. But to see you in the flesh, and you have a glow, and you're in this amazing environment for creativity and tranquility.
Yep.
And so thank you for inviting me up here.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, I was thinking about when you were in New Orleans for Jazz Fest, and you invited me to write something for Jam Bass.
Yeah.
And I think that was like one of my first pieces of writing that I had published outside of like a school thing, or like I had a newspaper column when I was like in high school in my city, like my town that I grew up in, but that was my first thing. And I was remembering that earlier today. I was like, you know what? I gotta say thank you for that, because I was so excited. I think it was an MIA show maybe or something.
Right
I'm sure you don't remember because there's been so much. But
I don't remember specifically the show, but I do remember asking you, leading the coverage to kind of spread far and wide. And
you wrote this,
was great.
Your big roundup for the fest that year, and I was so excited that I got to contribute to it. I was just like, wow, I'm the coolest person ever.
That is an amazing memory. Thank you for bringing that up, because now that you mention it, I do remember that, and that's awesome. And that was sort of like our embryonic sort of creative connection. And I've, just take a small measure of pride, and now here you are writing a book, and you have this amazing following for your work, which we're going to delve into in depth, and to know that, that little slice of history where it's like, and it just goes to show, like, I always add a lot of respect and admiration for just your compass when it comes to, like what's hot in the streets, musically, artistically, and we'll get into that too. But yeah, I had full faith that you would go to the show and you would deliver, and yeah, that's awesome that here we are from there.
Yeah, it is awesome. I don't know how you knew like that I could write or anything, but it means a lot when somebody like you were kind of a few years older than me, and I was like, I was 21, something like that. I was a pipsqueak.
Yeah.
So for somebody who had so much experience with music writing to invite me to do something like that, I remember it meaning a lot to me.
Wow. Right on.
Yeah. Spontaneously just remember that just now. So
that is beautiful.
Yeah.
And I think that's a great way to kick off the conversation. It just let the people out there listening understand that I didn't just come upon you since I lived in California or since you've, started doing your work in tarot and psychology, but that our roots are, like I said, embryonic. And that's I can't say that for really many of my guests, although I could have said the same for Karina, who was on, I believe, episode 4 or 5, and she's another link in this sort of this family, if you will, this sort of loosely connected, artistic, creative network of folks that I am so, just proud to be a member of, and to sit here with you is just a real joy. So everyone out there listening, this is a long-awaited convergence, and that I am so thrilled to be able to help Jessica just talk a little bit about her story, her path, her work. But let's take it back to the beginning before we get into the Jessica Dore and your tarot readings and psychology. What are like your roots, either academically or culturally, that sort of began this path? Where are you from? What did you study? And then let's maybe get through your
Italian and Irish Catholic household, very sort of classic Boston breed, I guess, like the Italian, Irish, and the Catholic thing. And then I went to New Orleans in 2005. I had been in college, but I didn't really know what I wanted to do, and so I decided.
What school were you in?
Well, I was at UMass in Amherst, and then I decided, because I had no idea what I wanted to do, I was going to take a break. Now, the other piece of it was that I met a guy that lived in New Orleans who you also know, who was also from Massachusetts, and he was an artist, a musician, and I wound up taking a break from college so that I could go live with my musician boyfriend in New Orleans in 2005, and wound up down there. Katrina happened shortly after I moved there, and then we went back, lived there. I went to Loyola. I studied communications, so I was doing a lot of writing in school. That
may have been why I thought subconsciously to ask.
That I knew how to write.
Because, if you're a communications major and studying writing.
Yeah, like I was doing journalism and stuff like that in college.
Did you have some experiences?
Yeah.
What were some of the sort of nascent, did you keep a journal?
I did. Oh God, I have so many, like I have like a laundry basket in my bedroom. The room that was my bedroom when I grew up, a laundry basket full of notebooks and journals. Like I had journals from age 5 or even 4, maybe. Like as soon as I knew how to write letters, I wanted to write stuff down. And it was, Dear Diary, today my sister was mean, and that was it, or whatever. But I had to be writing something. So for sure, I always liked to write. And in college, I think I just thought, well, if I'm going to go to college, I should do something that I like doing. So I did communications and English minor, that I think I'll be able to get a job doing. So communications, that was where that came in. I thought, well, I'll get a job somewhere doing something. Right. I don't know what, but so that was how the writing got started, at least.
How long were you in New Orleans before the storm?
Not very long, a few months. Okay. Like I got down there, I think it was April or May. I think it was May, and the storm hit end of August.
Sure. Wow. Yeah. Do you have any recollections of pre-Katrina New Orleans, like things that stick out that maybe weren't anymore, or that you noticed? Not really. I was so brand new to the city. Everything was new to me. Right. I had been there to visit a couple of times. I think I went to Jazz Fest once before I moved there. I think that makes sense because I came down. Yeah, Jazz Fest is usually in April, right? Correct. So I went down for Jazz Fest, and I went back to Massachusetts, and then I must have moved down that spring or after Jazz Fest. So no, I have it was the summer, and it's a blur.
Yeah.
Right. So, and you came back to New Orleans after the storm and spent a few years there, right?
I did. I was there till 2010. I was there from 2005 to 2010.
Yeah, you must have left, right? Because I'd been to Jazz Fest about 8 times by 2010, but one of the last times we'd hung out until years later was that Mardi Gras in 2010 when the Saints won the Super Bowl.
Oh, yeah.
I was living in Jacksonville, Florida, Jacksonville Beach, and I saw on some TV news program just the Super Bowl parade, and Mardi Gras up next, and next thing I knew, I was headed to my first carnival, and you took me to watch the Mardi Gras Indians, the second Dryads. I didn't know. And you made sure that I got there. It's one of the most rewarding and just absolutely beautiful cultural experiences that I've ever had, especially in that city. So while I have a moment, let me say thanks for bringing me down there. We also went to Tips for a show, Carl Denson or something. You helped make sure I had a really great carnival. Let me know a couple of the parades to go to and where to see them at. So
it's funny because actually that year, you saying that reminded me that it was the year that the Saints won I actually
Mardi Gras,
I was living in the Bay Area. I had just moved to the Bay, and I was there visiting. And you were there. We were both. We both just ended up there. But I had just moved. Like I had just left New Orleans, and then I was missing it. And my sister actually was like, I don't know why she did this. Like, she never does things like this for me anymore, but she bought me a flight. She's like, oh, I booked you a flight to New Orleans. I was like, what? So I went to New Orleans, and I stayed with some friends and got to do Mardi Gras, and it was great. And I saw you, and we went to some shows, which I'm sure you were I'm sure you took me to the shows, not the other way around.
Right.
But
maybe to the shows.
I maybe took you to Second and Dryads, but yeah, I'm sure that if it was Carl Denson, if it was anything at Tips, anything late night, I was probably your doing.
Okay, fair enough. But that's my recollection of that carnival. You just played, you and Karina too played such a role in helping me see past what the sort of national conversation is about Mardi Gras, which is like boobs and beads and sort of bacchanal, and I guess it's all those things, but it's really a spiritual, cultural, almost religious experience. Do you view it as, does it have any sort of resonance with you, fondness as a experience that you hold on to, or is it some flippant thing from your youth?
No, I have very fond memories of Mardi Gras, and I remember like learning about something like the Mardi Gras Indians, where, you know, there is really this very interesting dynamic with Mardi Gras where there's like, you see just how, in many ways, you see the sort of stratification, the racial stratification in New Orleans, where there's like white Mardi Gras and there's black Mardi Gras, where, you know, something like Second and Dryads, you get to see a lot of the black culture in New Orleans, the things that are unique to black people living in New Orleans, doing some of the traditional arts, and that's really, really cool. And you don't see that as much, I think, in the mainstream when you see what Mardi Gras is. Like you're saying, you see Bourbon Street and boobs and those terrible plastic beads, which I'm sure Karina talked about.
She sure did.
But yeah, I mean, I think for me that was those getting to see the whole picture and getting to see everything, and just the way that New Orleans was, the culture there, interactions between race and class and all of these different things. I mean, I learned so much from my time that I lived there. It's beyond anything that I had ever experienced growing up in Massachusetts, you know, in the town that I grew up in. It was very white, very sort of, what's the word? Monotonous?
Sure.
I don't know if that's
homogenized.
Yeah, like it was just very sort of, I didn't know anything about the world, you know.
So I appreciate you exposing me to that, you know, and I always try to make sure to support that however I can, such as talk about it on the show.
Yeah, I mean, I was lucky to get to be introduced to things in New Orleans that, I mean, I also just somebody who lived there for 5 years, you know, it's such a short time that it felt like a kind of a long time when I was there, because I think at that age, time just seems like it lasts longer for some reason than it does as you're getting older. But I still really feel like I was always kind of a visitor in New Orleans. You know what I mean? I was always lucky to be able to be at an event or to experience or to see something, or I was always the person that somebody was sharing with me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And yeah, I feel like I've just barely scratched the surface of New Orleans, having lived there for 5 years. You know what I mean?
Right, and it probably feels like a lifetime ago at this point.
It was a long time ago, and I haven't been back. I went down there and DJ'd with DJ T-Roy, who was like this dancehall DJ that I was obsessed with, and still obsessed because he's awesome. But this guy Troy, who is just a very, very nice person, and invited me to come down and DJ on Thanksgiving. I think twice, actually. I went down there on Thanksgiving and DJ'd, and but that was the last time I've been down there, and it's been a few years. It's been probably 5 years or so.
Right.
So I don't know what's going on down there.
When the time is right, I'm sure you'll find your way back
for sure,
serendipitously, just like that time in Mardi Gras when I saw you.
I hope so. Yeah, it's been coming up a lot more lately. For some reason, people are come to New Orleans, or come, you know, like friends that I haven't talked to in a while, or this conversation. It's been coming up.
Maybe a book tour or something.
Yeah. Ooh, that's a good idea.
I want to touch on all that, but you brought up the DJing and stuff, and you know, we talked reggae a bit. And the last time that I saw you in the Bay Area, when I first came out here around 2012, and you were living in Oakland, and we had lunch one day, and you had the turntable set up, and you were living in Oakland. So take me kind of through that, if you wouldn't mind. Like, you move out here in 2010, and you to kind of dive headlong into the work you're doing, not the tarot work, but kind of like psychology, writing, editing, if I'm not mistaken, and also being Lady J, the dancehall DJ. You know, how did all that come to be out here in the Bay? You know.
Well, yeah. When I was in New Orleans, I got really into dancehall because this DJ T. Roy, who I loved, and I used to go to his dancehall parties all the time. And then when I moved to the Bay, I was really excited because there's a really big sort of reggae and dancehall scene here.
Sure.
And a lot of artists that come from the Caribbean and stuff. And
Did that influence your moving here?
I think it did, to be honest. I knew a few DJs that were out here. I would sometimes listen to their mixtapes. I knew that there was a lot of people out here that were into the music, and you know how music is. It's like I don't need to have any other reason except that the music that I like is there, and I'll be there. You know, and of course, like if it was really dancehall that I was after, you know, well, why didn't I go to New York or you know Miami or you know wherever, somewhere where there's like a much bigger West Indian community,
right?
But I also just, you know, love the Bay Area, and so ended up out here. And I don't know, like I think I was in a time in my life where I was looking for something. It's like kind of think of Joseph Campbell and the Follow Your Bliss thing. And I remember just being like, I was feeling really stuck around something, but every time I would listen to dancehall in particular, it just takes me to another place. You know, the music that you love, it brings you somewhere else. And I was like, how can I just have this feeling in more ways, in more dynamic ways? How can I be with this in different ways other than just as a listener? And so I said, you know what, I'm going to buy some turntables and learn how to DJ and start to play with dancehall that way, so that you know I can engage with the music differently. So that was how that happened. And then I was lucky that this DJ out here, DJ Greenbee, who's like one of the more popular reggae dancehall DJs out here, she offered to come over to my house and teach me how to DJ properly because I didn't actually know. And I was just, she had me as a guest on my birthday when I had told her one night out at a party, hey, I'm DJing, I learned how to DJ. And she's like, oh, cool, you can come and play a set on your birthday. And I did. And when I went out to play, she was like, you don't know how to DJ. She was like, why don't I come over to your house and show you a few things? And I was like, wow, you know, like my life has been a series of people like yourself and like her and people that are just like, hey, let me help you out. Let me give you this little thing. And then I'm like, okay, cool. So she came to my house. I cooked dinner for her and she taught me how to DJ. And then from there, I just was super, super into it for a few years. And then I had a shift.
Right. But for a while there, it was a big passion of yours.
Yeah.
It was really cool to just watch from afar. You dive in. And what is, you know, and we talked off the air a little bit about, you know, that's not your culture. You're not native to dancehall culture. But from where you came from as a female and white Caucasian, where was your place in that world when you found yourself on the decks at a club or at a party? Would people show respect? Did you feel like you were in the club, or were those sort of archaic divisions rear their ugly heads?
I mean, it's really interesting. It's a question that I ask myself a lot. And as far as sort of like being a woman, I didn't really feel like that was, I think if anything, people were just like surprised that I could do anything at all. Like, oh shit, you know how to use a mixer? What? Like that. So that was always like, that was whatever. Like, cause in some ways that worked to my advantage, that it was like, well, if I can mix correctly from one song to another, then like you're gonna think I'm you know, like you're gonna be more impressed by that than you would if it was a man. I'm fine, that's fine with me, you know, like people were respectful. I think more for me where it was tricky was being white, being American, having no connection at all to Caribbean culture, to Jamaican culture specifically, and playing music that was, you know, some of the music it's deep and there's a lot to it, and it's not just something that you can I feel like it's not just something you can sort of just dabble with, you know, myself being a writer, being a storyteller. When I went to Jamaica and spent a significant chunk of time in Jamaica, I realized, wow, I don't know anything about, like, similar to what I'm saying about New Orleans. Like, I lived there for 5 years and I just barely scratched the surface of New Orleans. I may love dancehall, but I'm still just scratching the very, very surface of what this culture is, what is being talked about, what are the issues that are being addressed, what are the nuances. Like when I spent time in Jamaica, I went there for 5 months. When I came back, I haven't DJ'd since.
Wow.
I was just like, damn, I don't know. I felt like I didn't really have the business playing it, honestly. I don't know that maybe that sounds weird,
no,
but I was just like,
it's kind of shocking. Yes. Weird. No, I mean, it makes total sense, but it's not what I expected.
It's not. It felt to me that.
Take us through that. How did you end up in Kingston and in Jamaica, and your experience there, and then if you can explain it, why did that end result? Yeah,
I mean, so I loved dancehall, as I mentioned multiple times. Right. I was super into the genre of dancehall music, and I just love the way that it sounds. I love the way that it sounds. I love a lot. The lyrics, like, often are very, very poetic, like very beautiful. There's a lot of different like sectors of dancehall. It's not just like a monolith or whatever, but like, I got super into it. So that, I think, was probably the original reason why I wanted to go to Kingston, to go and hang out and meet artists and go to shows and go to, Stone Love and Weddy Weddy and some of the Stone Love is Weddy Weddy, but some of those iconic dance hall parties that I had heard about, and get to see some of the DJs and artists. And so I went and was there for 3 weeks the first time. And then I came back to the Bay, and I ended up leaving my job where I had been for 6 years working in self-help and psychology, book publishing.
That's what you were doing
that's what I was doing. And I decided I wanted to leave my job. So I went to Kingston for 5 months. I had some friends there who were like yoga teachers and healers, and I knew a yoga teacher there who teaches in the style of yoga that I practice every day. It's like a serious long-term daily practice that I've had and had at that point for several years. And I asked her, hey, can I come down and practice with you for a few months? And she's like, yeah, hell yeah. So I came down, and it was kind of a combination of things. I wanted a change of scenery. I needed to be somewhere different. I really enjoyed my time in Jamaica when I was there. I had some friends there that I had made from my first trip. Of course, I love the music. The second time that I went, though, I think like I said, I just realized how little I knew about Jamaican culture. As an outsider, I was just like, this is, you just realize that when you're somewhere, if you're paying attention and you're listening, and I'm always very aware of my identity in Jamaica because it's a majority Black country, and I'm white, obviously, right? So it's like stick out like a sore thumb a lot of times, and you can't help but just notice how you don't know what's going on, really, like, and that's not like, I have some really, really good friends there, and it's not like, oh, it's this total disconnect. It's just, for me, it felt a little bit disrespectful to, when you go to Jamaica and you listen to Jamaican DJs and you see the way that the crowd reacts, and you see what they're doing things that you don't know what is going on. You don't know what's going on as an outsider. Yeah. Different artists and the way that those artists interact, and the things that they have between them. Like, you just don't know the half of it. And it just felt kind of silly to me to be like,
no, I got a lot of respect for that.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's not a
like
joke.
Appropriation.
It's not a joke.
It
is. Yeah. I felt that it was, and I didn't really like it, and I didn't want to really be a part of that. So
it's admirable that you can separate yourself and be like, I love this music and I want to play it. And you went there seeking source. It sounds like, I want to get closer to it.
Right.
And then you got a good look at it, and you had too much respect for it to continue to be a practitioner when you really weren't a practitioner.
It's interesting. I mean, it's a thing that a lot of white people
That's
do.
Beautiful.
It's a thing that a lot of white people do, is go to other cultures and not, meanwhile, I'm Italian, I'm Irish. I've never been to Italy. I've never been to Ireland, still to this day. You know what I mean? Why am I went to India to practice yoga. I went to Jamaica. Like, it's like, you have to ask yourself at a certain point, like, what's going on here? What am I running from? Or what am I not wanting to claim in myself? Why am I so drawn to cultures that are not mine? I think this is a question that a lot of white people should be asking themselves. Be asking themselves.
I mean, this could be a whole
we could go
hole, right?
Yeah.
And I get what you're saying, and I want to probe it a little bit, but I think, and I say this, with respect. Our cultures, our histories. There's a lot to be ashamed of as white people. Like when you talk about like, okay, so we're gonna. Of course, traditions are beautiful, and I celebrate my heritage, and my family and where they came from. But I think we maybe seek a different understanding of ourselves, our consciousness, or human experience elsewhere, because there's some darkness at home that maybe it's just like doesn't fill you up the same way. And I want to get to your yoga practice too, because I feel like that's so connected to your work. But yeah, I find that in a lot of like sort of forward thinking or progressive or quote unquote woke communities, it's like our history is full of crusades and conquering and death and marginalizing other peoples, and it's hard to confront that.
Totally,
and claim it and celebrate it.
Yeah, and I wonder if we are able to do that work as white people, if we're able to do that work, how that would change the way that we're able to relate to other cultures, because it's like, or like other races or non-white, I don't know like how to say that, but it's like, because I think that there is sort of this, I don't know if it's parasitic, if it's, it's this need to take something and to cling on to it and to steal it and to own it and to make it our own and to not give credit where credit is due and to sort of it's not what about that dynamic would change if we were willing to go back and do our own work, go through our own suitcases, as you were kind of talking about earlier off the air, like look at what's in there, and then how does that change the way it's kind of like in the micro sort of relational sphere, like you sort of have to do your own work before then you're able to sort of connect healthily with another individual, appreciate that person without needing to sort of leech something off of them.
That's a fair assessment, definitely. But I also think there's a certain humble sort of deference to say to people of Eastern philosophy or in India or Buddhism or wherever you want to seek that sort of non-monotheistic pathway to creator, as if to say like, you know what, your way is the way, as opposed, because everything's like religion and sort of Western thinking is all be the best, be the first, claim it as your own. It's like I can say that maybe Judaism, which is my heritage, is not my pathway to creator, and I can have all the respect and honor the traditions of my family, but like when I'm trying to get to that place and seek that connection, it's not through the Torah, and I don't think that I'm claiming another's so much as I'm gracious that they have shown another route, another road, pathway. And so but I still want to do the work. I mean, I find myself now in this political climate, like navigating a whole lot of minefields of that sort of suitcase of my people, white people, Jewish people. There's a whole lot of loaded stuff with that, though. Totally,
it's complex. It's so totally
it applies
not
to New Orleans too. So much, right? Just claiming it versus just celebrating it, saying I want to go there and spend my money there and support your art and your culture, and then tell other people about it. But at what point am I claiming it or bastardizing it? It's a delicate balance.
It is, and I don't think there's one simple...
I admire you walking away from the tables and saying, like, I'm not going to be a dancehall DJ because I got a taste of what it really is. That's just admirable.
I don't like doing things that are not like it is everything that I said, and I have a lot of thoughts and feelings about it, and I listen to a lot of conversations, and I read a lot about some of these topics. Appropriation in particular, I think, is what I'm thinking about, but it is also just like I don't like doing things where I'm like I'm the kind of person I like to really dig into something and really know what I'm doing and know what I'm putting out and know what I'm a part of. And, I'm writing a book about tarot and psychology right now, and I'm all I do is read. Like you're here with me in my treehouse. All I do is read. I read and I practice yoga and I sleep and eat when I have to. And I occasionally meet a friend for dinner, but like, that's all I do. Why? Because I'm writing a book about this thing and I want to make sure that I understand it from so many different angles. Right. And when you're coming into a culture from another culture from the outside and there's just no way for me to have that level of understanding and I didn't want to do it without that, you know? So, and I'm not saying that everyone should do that, that's you know, like choice. I think it's great. It's cool that the arts do often, arts and spirituality do transcend these sort of borders of nations and communities and stuff like that. And that's necessary in a lot of ways, but yeah, it's just a personal choice for me with some, I think, ethical, like reasoning that's valid, but like, it's, I guess, a combination of things.
Yeah. I think you're on terra firma, you know, and I think you conveyed it and people understand it. I didn't know that was the end of that pursuit. You know, I obviously know that you have other things going on and that DJing wasn't a big part of your life, but I didn't know until now that it was a conscientious decision based in that. So I appreciate you going there, and you know, that was an important conversation on a lot of layers that I hope people can really dig into. But you did make one sort of helping me seg into the work that you're doing. But before I get there, I just want to ask, do you still love dancehall?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. So it didn't rob you of your appreciation. It's just taught you didn't want to be a DJ.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Just being the person who's presenting the music, who's selecting.
Yeah.
That doesn't need to be me.
Right on. Right on.
That doesn't need to be me.
Seen and overstood, as they say. But you had said, we talked about appropriating and these sort of traditions of hundreds or thousands of years, whether they be race or religion or geographic, talking about your own with Irish and Italian and going back there. This isn't the same, but you could say that tarot and psychology are both long-standing, time-honored traditions. One of academia and one of sort of, it could be undefined, and I've got a bunch of quotes highlighted of yours where you do your best to sort of frame it, of like what your version of tarot is. But do you find, is that a contradiction there? Because you're kind of taking, you know, from both, but you're not necessarily adhering to the established protocols of both. You're making it's really what do you say, like new land. It's sort of, you're really breaking some boundaries and carving out some new ideas or processes. So we got to start at the beginning. Okay.
Okay.
When does tarot become, such a vital part of your life? And how did that come to be?
So I was working in self-help and psychology book publishing at a publisher here in the East Bay in Oakland called New Harbinger Publications, which is a mission-based public publisher that was started by a clinical psychologist who was working in Haight-Ashbury in the 70s.
Wow.
And he was like, man, there's so many people that need help and we can't individually see them. So let's make books and we'll just disseminate the information that way. That way more people can get the care that they need and they'll get these, evidence-based treatments for these different disorders and issues that they're having. And, I got so much out of my time while I was working there. And one of the things that I got while I was working there was I had a couple of coworkers who were into tarot and they came to my house for dinner one time and somebody brought tarot cards and I was going through something at the time as usual. And somebody pulled some cards for me and I was like, I couldn't believe how seen I felt. I couldn't believe how useful it was for me, the messages that came through. Yeah. I said, man, I got to get some cards. Now, my mother had that same deck. It's called the Rider-Waite deck, and with the illustrations by Pamela Coleman Smith when I was growing up. So she had them. So I was familiar with them, but I never used them myself. And so I got a deck, and this was in probably like 2011 or so. And from then on, I just pulled cards every day for myself, and I became totally obsessed. And I was, at that same time, my day job was reading, going through, working with these psychology books, and the books that I was working with were books for therapists about how to treat different things. And so I was learning a lot about clinical psychology, not just like self-help pop psychology. It was like clinical stuff.
Right.
And even though I wasn't a therapist at the time, I was learning a lot about what goes into treating different things like anxiety or OCD or eating disorders or psychosis or whatever. And so I was studying both of those things at the same time, tarot and psychology, and they just went together for me from the very beginning.
Was there a lightning bolt moment, or was it a sort of slow marriage of the two?
It was a slow marriage of the two, and it was a me pulling cards and looking at the image and reading something that someone had written about it in a book or on the internet and saying, wow, that reminds me so much of this concept that I was reading about earlier today or last week about experiential avoidance or self-compassion or, one of these things that one of these concepts or skills that I was learning about from the psychotherapy field. And so it was just over the time of learning the cards, I was always noticing that they were visual metaphors for a lot of the same stuff. And that's not, it felt really like, wow, why is nobody else interpreting the cards this way? It's so obvious that they're so the same. It's all the same stuff. Now that I'm writing this book, I'm realizing that's because a lot of this stuff is all coming from the same place.
I was going to say it's a revolutionary thought, but when we think about it, it's like, of course, because you're really just you're going to the same place, which is the sort of like healing arts, if you will. Mm-hmm. But one is this clinical, like sort of westernized, teachings and papers and ideas and established modus operandi, and this tarot is this undefined mysticism, right? That's unfortunately that perception leads a lot of folks astray to think that it's like some Ouija board, spooky, or solely Vedic astrology, and people have a lot of misconceptions, and I was one of those people for a long time, and it wasn't until I had the fortune of my own partner Alicia bringing tarot into my life once we got together, because it's a vital part of hers, mm-hmm. and then being made aware of your work and just feeling, again, to follow your yes, I was like, I need more of this. I should investigate more and integrate it in my life. When I read the cards and read, whether it's your explanations or even like Hafiz or Rumi, mm-hmm. it's like it was meant for me. It fucks me up. Like, in your experience, does everybody who surrenders to the idea that this will help me feel like they're being spoken to directly?
I mean, I think if you're open to it, yeah, because the tarot is a deck of cards with these four, there's the major arcana, which are these 22, sort of major archetypes, the trumps that are in the deck. And then the what's not a major arcana is broken down into four suits, just like a regular playing card deck. The four suits are, at least in my analysis of the way that I write and teach tarot, are representing the four basic domains of the human being experience. The swords relate to cognitive and intellectual, psychological, analytical domain. The cups relate to emotional, relational domain. The pentacles relate to the behavioral and material domain, and the wands relate to the energetic and spiritual domain. If you look at that cognitive, emotional, behavioral, and energetic / spiritual, that is what makes up the human experience. We all have all of those things, right? So what you see when you pull the cards is cards that are speaking to those different domains of your experience. It's not, it's human. It's a book about the human experience. So it kind of can't not, the major arcana are a whole nother story, but the majority, the bulk of the deck is these four suits that are just relating to what it's like to be a person who has an intellectual domain of experience, what it's like to be a person who thinks thoughts, what it's like to be a person who experiences emotions, and the various things that happen with that, and it's really amazing, actually, that and I think that's one of the powers of tarot, is that you just feel seen, and you're like, how is it possible that this is making me feel so seen right now? But that's how, because it's somebody put these things together in such a way that it's almost like this encyclopedia of the human experiences in these different domains of our being
that are evergreen, like timeless.
Yeah, so, timeless.
And that's what's so profound about it, is you can read even some old tarot stuff, and it's as contemporary and real as, you know, something that you posted. You know what I mean? And that's I think what is so mind-blowing about it, is that the human experience, as we evolve, it's the same, you know, like the feelings, the thought, the emotions, the conflicts, the conquests, everything about life is sort of like contained in those parameters. And then it's people like you that, you know, are kind of deciphering it in a language that everybody in 2020 can easily understand. Because sometimes when you consult the books or the established things with tarot, they're esoteric and sort of woo-woo, if you're not open to that.
Yeah.
If you're not open to being addressed or spoken to in such verbiage, it reads as this sort of, you know, kind of not very grounded. But you address people in very primordial human today terms, but it's still rooted in those concepts. What was the moment when you're like, I'm going to break this down and deliver it? We could talk about social media and the power there, but just the fact that you're like, I could take this and turn it into something so relatable.
I mean, it's really, this is almost maybe a little bit of a, I don't know if it's like the best response to that question, the best direct response to that question, but what I've been learning as I've been studying and really, really diving deep into the tarot and the history of the tarot and where it comes from, there's sort of this legend of the tarot, which is that, you know, these ancient Egyptian priests were, you know, they had these mysteries, right? And they were like, we have these keys, and we have these keys to sort of like the laws of nature, right? And we want to preserve this information, and we want to make sure that it stands the test of time. So these priests are sitting around and they're like, how can we do it? We put it in a book? Nah, that's too, you know, whatever. I know, we'll put it in a deck of cards because people love playing cards, you know, and then, you know, people who just want to play cards, they'll just play cards. But people who are inclined to understand the deeper mysteries of life will see the mysteries tucked in, hidden in there, and they'll start to use them, and then they'll see that it's a map to understanding the nature of things and reality. The interesting thing about some of those principles that come from that old time that the tarot is based on is that they are things like, you know, they're hermetic laws, right? So like opposites are identical in nature but different in degree, something like that, an idea like that. The law of, or I don't know if it's a law, it is a law. Rhythm compensates. What goes up comes down. You know, like things like that. And all of these ideas are tucked into the tarot. Now, the thing is that actually all of those ideas are, not all of them, but many of those ideas are also tucked into sort of our contemporary psychotherapy models, the therapies that psychotherapists are doing with their clients today, that they're doing all this research on, and they're figuring out these interventions work. Those interventions are based on the same ideas that, you know, being able to hold two things that seem to be opposite at once is the key to living well. You know, understanding that, you know, there's so much. It's like I'm getting like off the deep end here,
no,
I think, but
stuff.
It's really powerful. And I think it's a lot of it for me has been, I saw the connections immediately that, oh, this card is talking about this idea from dialectical behavior therapy, which is a popular evidence-based therapy that's used a lot with people who have suicidal tendencies, suicidal behaviors, suicidal thoughts, self-harm, emotion regulation issues, so on and so forth. It's a well-known and popularly used therapy today. A lot of the ideas in DBT, they're same stuff. It's hermetic. It's hermetic principles that's in there. They might not know that. But it's interesting that these things sort of, they're archetypal, they get passed down through humans, and they talk about it in a different way, but it's the same stuff. I've had to sort of work backwards. I noticed the connections right away, but I didn't know exactly where the stuff in the tarot was coming from. Then I started researching the tarot and I realized where it was coming from, started to understand more about Hermeticism, about some of these ancient Egyptian philosophies and ideas, and then realized, oh, this this stuff is actually what's underlying. Also, a lot of these major world religions are using similar ideas, using some of that same stuff. It
had to be like mind blowing as you started to like realize it, because you made the connection, but then you dove all the way in
and then realized, wait, this actually really is the same shit. Like, it's
is there any scholarly papers or anything out there that sort of addresses this literal like line between the two, or is yours basically kicking down that door? So
my book is gonna be there. You know, tarot sort of, you know, it disappeared for a while. You know, that legend has been that I told earlier. It's kind of been proven to be legend and not real because, or said to be not real because tarot sort of disappeared off the map from that time until like the late 14th, 15th century, and then it showed up in Italy.
Really? So it is your roots in a way.
It is, which I didn't know at the time that I got into it. And then I started getting into it, and yeah, totally. And it feels good for me to dig into that. But
it goes hand in hand with what we just talked about, about going back to your own backyard.
Exactly.
That's so perfect.
It is. It's very perfect. But yeah, the tarot kind of came back on the scene, and even in the deck that I use, the Rider-Waite deck, it was published in the early 1900s, and this is sort of the time of Carl Jung and psychoanalysis. You know, Carl Jung, who was a student of Freud. So a lot of the literature out there about tarot and psychology is looked at through the lens of psychoanalysis, which is a traditional sort of old school style way of doing it that came from Jung and Freud. My work is focused on contemporary models, so the models that have come into favor as sort of the golden standard: cognitive behavioral therapy, dialectical behavior therapy, ACT. You know, these are.
How long have they been the accepted models, I should say?
I think around the mid-century, around the 1950s, was the sort of the beginning of behaviorism-ish, and where maybe not the beginning of behaviorism, but it was the beginning of a behavioral approach to psychology, which means that instead of we sit here and we dive into the unconscious and we interpret dreams and we do all this kind of stuff, we're going to look at behavior and we're going to focus on like, what are the actions that you're taking in your life and how can we change those if they're not working for you? It's a very different, do you understand? It's a very different approach to, the first one was clinical too, but it was more, you lay on the couch and you talk about your childhood. Get it? Yeah, behavioral therapy is, okay, here's your homework. You're gonna go to a party even though you have social anxiety, because that's gonna challenge the anxiety that you have. It's very behavioral. It's focused on behavior and change. So these models are sort of more, and it works because, you know, insurance companies, they want to see observable evidence that what they're paying for is working. There's a whole thing about it.
Wow.
But the stuff is, there's a lot of really good stuff in those therapies, which is what I'm doing with my book, which is bringing in concepts from some of these newer therapies, incorporating them with the older stuff, incorporating all of that with the old stuff, which I'm talking about, the Hermetic stuff, that old philosophical, spiritual stuff that is really underlying all of it.
Everything.
Psychology is the study of the soul. It's not it turned toward becoming a science rather than it could have been.
You see it as like the arts?
It is. Wow. There was a very like sort of distinct point, if you look at the history of psychology, where psychology sort of could have gone either in the direction of being like philosophy, humanities, or it could have gone in the direction of being a science. And they started studying behavior and observable, and that was where psychology became a science. The word psyche means soul, so it's always the study of the soul. You want to call it a science, that's fine. You know, but it's always going to be a study of the soul.
I get that. It's just ironic because it's like medicine in a lot of ways. Like you're considered a doctor as a psychologist and psychiatrist, but it is in essence the study of the soul. And with that, so much comes along with it. It's not just you know, studies in the traditional sense. You know, there's writings and films and plays and so much that are of the soul, that are symptomatic of any number of things. So when you put it like that, I mean, it just opens the floodgates.
Yeah, tell me about it.
That's incredible and really revolutionary, and I appreciate you breaking that down. You're also reaching into some other places. Like I was reading one that really resonated with me, where you were quoting the like Satanist, occultist, Aleister Crowley, right, who I know about because I loved heavy metal music when I was a kid. There's all that like Satanism, so I read some books and stuff. But you're not afraid to pull in ideals and ideas, concepts from not just untraditional sources, but you know, that's somewhat controversial. I mean, that guy drank blood, had orgies, like castles, and you know.
Crowley was a major leader in the tarot history, though. He has a deck called the Thoth deck, like the Crew of Thoth in New Orleans.
Right. Wow, I see.
And,
it's all connected.
Yeah, I know. Bringing it back to New Orleans here, and nobody calls it Thoth except me, and I call it Thoth because in New Orleans the Crew of Thoth is called Crew of Thoth. I think that's how it's pronounced. And people always say, "Oh, Thoth."
Right.
Like Thoth, like I'm like, no, it's Thoth. But you know, in New Orleans, like people pronounce things however they want to. Yeah. And so I don't know if that's actually what it's called. But Crowley was a major.
How is it pronounced with regard to?
People say all kinds of things. I don't think anybody really knows. Okay. Thoth. I say Thoth because of that, but that's the only reason. But Aleister Crowley was, you know, there's sort of two big popular decks. One is the Rider-Waite, which I've mentioned multiple times, and the other one is Aleister Crowley's Thoth deck. And it's a big deal. Yeah, it's a.
Is it considered like sort of the dark side or some?
No, I don't. Not really. I mean, it's intense. I have a friend who said that the deck is like every time you pull a card, it's just like an ominous bummer. That was how he called the deck, which I don't think that's true. I think there's a lot of. I'll show you some of the cards just if you want to later. No, not really. He uses a lot of astrology. The devil is one of the major arcana in the tarot, and in Crowley's deck, the devil is a great card. It's not about addiction or about capitalism or any of this kind of stuff. It's about like pleasure, and I'd have to actually go look because I don't know all of his interpretations, but.
That just struck me because you know you often pull from psychology texts or like maybe tarot that I was more familiar with, or just felt. And when I saw the Aleister Crowley, I was unaware of the connection. Do you is occultism still alive and well in the practice of tarot? Is it still really rooted in that, or do you think it's sort of evolved into more of this behaviorist thing?
No, I mean, I think the tarot is. I think you can't. I think that you can use tarot. The way that I teach, I like to sort of allow people to be flexible and to use it as a tool. You know, I've been quoted in different media outlets that I've been interviewed for saying that the tarot is kind of like it's almost like the Rorschach ink blot test where, whoa, what do you see? And I cringe when I think about myself saying that because it's really, it kind of doesn't do justice to the some of these deeper, older, it definitely doesn't do justice, and it's insulting to people who have really, really understand what the cards are about and what they're talking about and the occult roots of tarot.
Right.
So yes, alluring. I mean, I think it's, I think you can, the great thing about tarot is you can, it will meet you where you're at and where you're ready to go into.
That's what I find. Yeah. You could be very entry level, practical, surface level, should I, shouldn't I kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And then it could also like dig up some super deep rooted trauma or joy or repressed memories that you never thought about. And frankly, that happens a lot with your work, where I would just read, or Alicia will send me that days, and it'll just be like, take me back to some childhood place, feeling, emotion, memory, some good, some not so. Yeah. I think that's the power of the deck. It's not just like, point me in the direction of a decision I need to make. Yeah. That you can ask, but sometimes it just, I don't ask anything. I just accept. And it'll just take me to a really profound place. Often the avoidance stuff. Yeah. Yeah. You talked a little bit about that in one of the interviews, like the concept of avoidance and how it pertains to relationships and stuff. Uh-huh. At what point in time did you was it a conscientious effort? Because you said in the one interview you made a post with a card and an explanation. You got like 15 or 20 likes, and it felt really good. But I mean, we're a long way from there. Like, at what point did it become a thing? And then when did you notice, like, wow, people are into this? And just kind of take us up to the point where, you know, people like the New York Times and the Ringer and the Inquirer are calling, asking for interviews. Like,
yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think, like, it's been an interesting experience in so many ways to see the way that social media has just, like, it's just become this sort of, it's taken on a life of its own. But I think at one point I honestly, I don't even know. It was just, I was doing it every day. I was in graduate school, and by doing it, I mean, because I guess we haven't really said what it is that we're talking about exactly.
Okay.
I post every day on Twitter, I post a card of the day, and I say, like, today's card, and then I write a little caption with it. And so, the caption is, you know, it's the image of the card, but then it's a caption that is based on a traditional interpretation or a classical interpretation of the tarot card, but it's connected with usually some idea from the psychology or behavioral science fields. Sometimes more spiritual, sometimes whatever, but I generally stick in those fields of psychology, spirituality, and behavior with my interpretations. And yeah, I mean, I think, like, I just kept doing it. I just did it every day, and I think I was, you know, it sounds a little bit arrogant to say it, but I think I was taking all of this knowledge and information that I had gathered over 6 years of working for New Harbinger, and then I was writing freelance about behavioral science and psychology after that for a few years before I started grad school. So it was like I was just gathering a lot of information about psychology and behavior and how our minds work and all of these things, and folding them in with delivering that information with a tarot card, and people just liked it. And it was consistency and doing something different. And I often say that I think the reason that it's one of the reasons it has done as well as it's done is that it's unexpected. When you see today's card, you expect someone's going to tell you your fortune. I'm not telling anybody's fortune. I'm giving a little nugget of, like, information, or sometimes a question or a perspective. Yeah, like, and I think people are like, oh, and people always say things like, wow, this is so on point, and wow, this is so accurate. And I'm like,
that is a really
it's hilarious.
You see so many go, how did you know I needed to hear this today?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, and it's funny because it's like you can see the way that people still, even in their mind, even as they're reading it, they're still categorizing it in, this person just read my fortune.
Yeah,
like, they still think that's what's happening.
That's the whole, like, you know, woo-woo nature of tarot. Like,
yeah, they're expecting that. The Zoltar. The Zoltar.
So,
I'm Zoltar. I'm Zoltar, only the psychology version.
But it really does have that holy shit feeling. And it's funny because I posted it when I saw one of the, I said, yeah, this is my friend. She's killing it. I just read this article. And a bunch of people that I know, a couple from New Orleans actually, oh my God, I love her.
Oh,
like,
wow.
They don't know you,
that's so cool.
you through me or anything. They just are fans.
Amazing.
And it was just really,
that's
that was another reason why I was like, I should have her on the show, because I knew that people in my network were, you know, following you a little bit. You had mentioned about your yoga practice, and we talked a little bit about, like, going to India or going to other cultures. But when I was reading multiple of the articles, it said that, you know, you wake up at 5 a.m, you have a little coffee, and then you do a 2-hour intensive ashtanga yoga practice daily. But you don't actually select which, you pull 3 cards, do the yoga, then subconsciously, whatever happens in that practice, you come out of that and you know the card. And then so
it sometimes happens that way, and other times not. It's like it's
simplified in the article.
Yeah, like, and exactly, and it's kind of like, yeah, sometimes it's that I'll pull a few cards and something comes to me. Sometimes it's, to be honest with you, sometimes it's I have a really great idea that I want to share, and I match it with a card. That's very unconventional. Yeah. People probably freak out if they knew that was. I don't think I've ever said that to anybody. Like that's sometimes what it is.
But
that
it's not
necessarily.
I got to be an hour and 5 minutes into this to hear that. So they'll be very invested in this to get that nugget.
That's great, and they should be an hour and 5 minutes into this. So, like, yeah, I mean, it's okay to do that. Like, I think it's okay to use it's in some
There's
ways
no
it's
rules to this shit.
I don't think so. I listen.
Not what you're doing.
I'm not. I don't do well with like rules.
Yeah,
like,
we
which is
talked
why
about that.
why I do what I do. It's like I'm not really. It's interesting because when I started talking about tarot and psychology on social media, I was worried that my colleagues in the psychology field were going to think I went off the deep end and
Sure.
were going to not want to work with me anymore on freelance projects or hire me. They were going to think I was totally crazy, whatever. Actually, that has not been the case. The pushback that I've gotten is from like people who are very entrenched and rooted in the occult and the magic communities, and people who take tarot very seriously and who think that what I'm doing is watering down, taking too much creative license with interpreting the cards, using them in a way that's irresponsible, things like that. And that's been very interesting for me to see just how kind of like the pushback, the psychology and mental health community is very into it. It's the, because, these are folks that just are trying to help people, but the folks who have really done put in the time to understand what these cards are all about from
Right.
the beginning, like they don't like some people don't like to see people using them so loosely like I'm doing.
Yeah, you had acknowledged that in I guess one of your newsletters and in one of your posts. So you said that people sometimes criticize. Well, first of all, if you have critics, you're doing something right. But people sometimes criticize your interpretations for being too loosely based on the classical ones, and then you say, how as a language artist and a writer and a healer, your primary interest is in what's medicinal. Is there a disconnect there where the traditionalists feel like you're in essence like betraying some sort of code by taking and breaking it down for your needs, which is not some order of operations? You pull the card, you do some ritual, you get the reading, but like you might have the idea first, pull the card, whatever it is. Are you experiencing a blowback or some sort of rejection from tarot communities?
It's not like too much blowback. It's just that at this point there's I think I have like 120,000 or something around there followers on Twitter. So there's a lot of people that see the stuff that I post and it circulates widely. And so I do occasionally get people who are, very knowledgeable about the sort of traditional interpretations of the cards. The interesting thing is, they'll comment and they'll say, that's not what the card means. Actually, it means this. Da, 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 da. But the thing about it that I find really interesting is that, I'm living in a treehouse writing a book about tarot. So pretty much all I do is read about tarot. I'm reading about mysticism. I'm reading about the occult. I'm reading about psychology, like all the things that I need to know, and the history of tarot and tarot through all these different lenses. And I'm looking at the interpretations by, let's say, somebody like Arthur Waite, who made the Rider-Waite deck, and Aleister Crowley, who made the Thoth deck. It's the same set of cards, for the most part,
right.
With a few like differences in the archetype names, but they're generally the same cards. They interpret the cards differently. They don't say the same thing about them. So my thing is, if they can do that, why 100 years later, or however many years later, am I not allowed to do that? I think about Joseph Campbell a lot, who talked about updating traditions in order to reflect the times. We need our own myths. We need our own traditions. Otherwise, this old stuff, it belongs to another generation. We don't live in the same time as they did. We live in actually a very, very different time than they did. So I do my best to honor their understandings of the cards, because I know that they had access to information that I don't have access to, that they were drawing from. However, I also am going to give myself permission to, as an artist, interpret something for my community and my people and people that I see who can benefit from it and use it, period.
Right.
And I think we'll see when the book comes out, we'll see what people think. I'm planning to reach out to somebody who is very well known in the tarot community for a book that they have written, and I'm going to see whether that person will be interested in writing a foreword. It'll be interesting to see what that person thinks.
Right. And their response.
Yeah.
Will kind of be, it would be their particular response, but it might be sort of indicative of the...
Yes.
community at large
Yeah.
attitudes
Yeah.
if they are unspoken.
And then the decision has to be made, like, me knowing, you know, I know what my work does for people. I at least a small amount of what people tell me. The emails that I get, the notes I get, the DMs I get, the stuff that people tell me that they share the cards with their partners, with their mothers, with their parents, with whoever, and that they with their therapist, they talk about it.
Conversations,
and I'm like,
that are harder to.
If that's wrong, I don't know what. Like,
you don't want to be right.
Exactly. Yeah. I'm kind of like, I don't see how it's. I always am mindful of respecting tradition. I'm mindful of not taking things, going back to our earlier conversation, I'm mindful of not just cherry picking and taking something, not really understanding it and doing whatever with it. I don't think that's what I do with tarot. I have studied the tarot cards for a long time now at this point, and in depth. It's literally my entire job right now is to research and write about tarot. So it's not like I'm just disregarding and saying, nope, they mean what I want them to mean. Right. That said, if I decide that I think that this interpretation is more resonant than this other one, and I can make the connection, I'm going to go with it. If I think it's going to be more, when I say resonant, I mean medicinal. Right.
And I mean, the numbers don't lie, like to borrow a phrase from Jay-Z, you know, like people are responding, reacting, they're feeling some kind of way, mostly positive, mostly rewarded or validated or fulfilled or enlightened. Any number of those sort of holy shit feelings that come from the readings, and they weren't, for whatever reason, whether they didn't trust tarot, weren't exposed to it, thought of it as woo-woo, it wasn't until you presented it on their phone to them every morning in words that everyone can easily understand and relate to that it started to have that impact. And I think that that's what makes what you do so revolutionary and maybe somewhat, I don't know, dangerous or egregious to this sort of archaic tarot powers that be, if you will.
The thing is, it's like, you got to think about, too, how to get people, what is, you know, you have to, I think, personally, if the interest really is that we want people to understand the tarot and the major arcana specifically as a guide to a spiritual way, that this is sort of like the way to this sort of enlightenment, if you will. If that's the case, then my thing is, how do you get people in the door? Do you get people in the door with the super heady, like,
no, you
very,
lose them, right?
The people don't even understand what's being said. I mean, some of these books, I have no idea what these guys are talking about. And I really try. Right. You know, I'm willing to do that, to really try to understand. How is somebody off the street? You know, so for me, my introduction to tarot was not through the Hermetic, you know, principles or through any of that stuff, the ancient Egyptian, like, mysteries. I had no idea about what any of that stuff was, but I got my foot in the door. And as the years went by through practice, I started to get a little bit more curious about, what are some of these other things, and dig in a little bit deeper. And that was my entryway, and I think that's just fine. And actually, I think it's great. Now I'm attached. Yeah. Now I'm invested. I have some skin in the game. I really want to understand, and I'm more comfortable with the cards that I can actually go there. Like, I'm having a whole experience out here in the hills of Berkeley, studying the spiritual path that is sort of outlined for the seeker in the tarot, which is not something that I was doing previously.
Right. That's amazing. And like a totally organic path to get here, not contrived. There's no like, I'm going to major in this and study this, get this internship, and then this is going to happen. Ironically, that's how it happened, because you worked for the psychology publisher and you ended up out here. Yeah. I just think it's really cool how all the sort of pieces fell in place, follow your yes, and now, even if it wasn't wildly successful, it sounds like, and it is, it sounds like it's equally rewarding personally, spiritually, intrinsically for you. Yep. And then you inject that into your interpretations, and then we are the beneficiaries, like the people. So thank you for doing it. I wanted to so the yoga fits in, and is that just your personal practice, or does it fit into the elixir of the tarot psychology thing?
It does, because yoga is...
Why ashtanga, first of all?
What I like about it is that it's practiced in silence at one's own pace. Everybody sort of has... you're given... There are 6 series of postures, so like 6 sequences of postures, and you start when you first go to an ashtanga class, a traditional, it's called Mysore style ashtanga class. The teacher gives you a few poses from the first series, the primary series. Once you've sort of gotten those down, the teacher will give you another one. It might be a week later, it might be 2 weeks later, it might be a year later. You know, the teacher sort of sees what's going on, what's happening with your body, whatever. But it's a very independent practice, and the teacher is there to give you new poses as you're ready for them. Now, I've been practicing for 9 years, so my practice is 2.5 hours long, because I have a lot of poses since I've been doing it for a long time. Which actually, I think the longer you practice, the fewer poses you need to do in order to get yourself to the space that we're trying to get ourselves into, which is this sort of ceasing of the activity of the mind. Very difficult thing to do for, obviously for people like us. But yeah, I mean, it fits in, actually it really fits in with what I was just saying about sort of the entryway to tarot, or like with yoga. It was like, I started practicing yoga because I just wanted to be in shape and I wanted to take better care of myself. And what I found was a spiritual path. Now it's like, it's my life. I go to bed at 8 o'clock. I wake up at 5 in the morning. I don't do any of the things that I used to do. I'm sure that I did with you back in New Orleans when I lived there. I just live a very different lifestyle. And I've been living this way for a long time, and it works really well for me and my sort of constitution and the work that I do. And but I needed that entryway, and I needed a teacher that was going to be like, yeah, it's cool for you to just come here for whatever reason and not make it this super spiritual thing. It's just like, yeah, whatever, come do your practice and take from it whatever you want. That's how I think of with tarot. It's like, take the deck, do it, whatever. If you're using it in a more of a surface level way, or you're pulling cards and reading your fortune, I don't care what you're doing. The fact is, you're using the cards, you're engaging the cards. Let the cards do their thing to you over time. And yoga is similar. It does its thing to you over time. You don't have to go in like, I'm trying to get enlightened, I'm trying to make my mind stop, and just let it do its thing to you. Surrender. And see what happens. Yeah. And I think that, yoga as a spiritual path, as a path of becoming one with God, that is the same path that tarot is talking about. And I use the term God loosely. Right.
Creator.
Here.
Not
whatever is all of this.
Right.
Yeah.
And
the totality of things.
And you didn't know that 9 years ago when you dove into ashtanga, that it would be a part of this whole process for you. But now it sounds like it's all sort of interwoven and connected, and it's just you. It is, I am this, and it is I, whether it's the yoga practice, the cards, or all that comes with it, the routine of up at dawn and asleep after dusk. That's pretty amazing. I want to finish up, because we've been going, we're hour 15, which is great. We've been very engaging, and I appreciate you giving me this much time. But I found one of the most ironic things was when I finally made it to Oakland and moved here. You had moved to Philly, where I'm from, and where I spent most of my 20s and 30s. Which is cool, and I think it's great, and I know you love it there, and we talked off air about some of the pros and cons of both coasts. But in all the articles they reference, you had a tarot circle in Philly. Yeah. So for those who were wondering, like, is this something that's just an individual practice? It sounds like it could be like a community unifying thing. Yeah. How did that come to be, and what was that, or is that?
So Tarot Circle, when I was in graduate school, I throughout all this time, we haven't really touched on this, but I ended up going to graduate school to get a master's in social work because I wanted to have a license to do therapy. And also honestly, I wanted to be able to talk about what I wanted to talk about and do so with sort of the legitimacy of having this like social work license or having an MSW, being a licensed mental health professional. That way sort of nobody could tell me I had no right to talk about the things that I talk about with psychology. And I think honestly, that's why I did it. But while I was in grad school, I was working as an intern, therapist in an eating disorder program, doing the group therapy with the people who were there. And we did a group with tarot cards per the request of some of the people who were in the program. And it was awesome. Like everyone pulled cards for themselves, and then we just kind of went around and talked about recovery and having an eating disorder, and what the cards were bringing up, and it was powerful. Like I had run groups with some of these folks for, it was like a 9-month internship, and had been running groups with them for a while, and some of the things that the cards were bringing up were like so. It was just like it would have taken us so many sessions to get to that for them to touch on that thing. You know what I'm saying? The card was like an immediate access point to something super deep and like super important. I think, and
another way
felt
to
like
implement.
people were, yeah, exactly. And so when I was in there, I was like, well, I should have this in public. Like this should be a public thing, like a tarot circle where people can come. It's essentially a support group. It's not like, I'm not like running it. It's a group of people who pull cards together and collaborate on sort of interpreting them with each other. And so I started a group in West Philly, and that's exactly what it was. It was a support group where we used tarot cards as basically ways to prompt discussion and to give people permission to talk about the things that they were going through, and to get support from the group in the form of collaboratively interpreting the cards. So once again, it's like it's almost a tricky way of delivering support and information, like I do on Twitter. It's like, oh, you think you're getting your fortune told, but really I'm giving you like a piece of medicine that comes from something that maybe is evidence-based, or maybe is coming from like whatever it is, but some piece of wisdom that can help you on your path. And Tarot Circle, again, it's you think you're going into look at tarot cards or whatever, but what you end up coming into is a supportive space that's very therapeutic, where you get to connect with your peers and you get to be creative, and a lot of tears and a lot of, just like, it was awesome, cathartic, man. It was great. And it's still there. The folks who were part of it with me are still holding it up and running it. There's another one, I think, that's going to start in LA with some of the people from Philly two people from Philly moved to LA, and they want to start a tarot circle there. So I'm always encouraging. One started in San Francisco. So I'm kind of encouraging people, like, you can have this too. It's a great supportive space. And
we've actually done that and not known it. But one of my first really amazing, holy shit, tarot moments was I was at this festival, Lightning in a Bottle. We'd been up all night dancing and stuff. The sun was coming up. Everyone likes to drink tea in the morning in the whole like burner community. It's like, the sun comes up, you drink tea, and someone had the deck out and the Hafiz book, and we just sat around for like an hour, just pulling cards. Strangers, like, so a couple friends, you know, Alicia and I early in our relationship, a couple friends, and then a couple randoms just at a picnic table at 7 a.m, pulling cards, talking about life.
It's awesome.
Yeah,
they're amazing. I mean, they're an amazing way to connect with people, because the card gives you permission to share something that you wouldn't just share in a regular conversation with strangers. Yeah. You wouldn't just say that, but the card is going to give me permission to disclose this thing, and you get more connection, deeper connection, more intimacy, and we need that. Like, let's be honest.
We really do.
Yeah.
Well, that's awesome that you can be a portal for so many folks, and not just your tarot circles and the people that you know in real life, but through the power, for better or worse, of social media, you're reaching a lot of people. So I can speak on behalf of thousands to say thank you, and deep bow of gratitude.
Yeah, thank you.
And with that, also a deep bow for the time and the hang in this beautiful place. And I hope we can do it again. No mics, just chilling. I know you got a crazy schedule, but I would love for you to meet Alicia. And if you want to stay out past your bedtime, maybe we could do like an early jazz night at a bar.
I would do that. I would do that.
Mellow. Music's our thing. We gotta go.
Friday nights usually are my night, because I don't practice yoga on Saturday. It's my one day that I don't practice, so I can sometimes make it work. Yeah, if I really have a coffee, and
if not, then maybe just a meal one day. But we got to get some hangs in. Totally. This conversation was a reminder of how and why I love you. So.
I love you too. So thanks for inviting me. This is awesome.
So we'll have the links to all your your Instagram and your Twitter on the show notes. But for those listening, it's the Jessica Dore, TheJessicadore. So at the Jessica Dore on Twitter, Instagram, and you'll let us know when and where the book drops, and we'll be sure to plug the hell out of it.
Yeah.
Okay, we look forward to it. So,
right.
Signing off from the Berkeley Hills, beautiful treehouse with the Jessica Dore. This is B-Gets. You've been listening to the Up for Life podcast.